Extraordinary developments on Capitol Hill. Democrats pointing fingers at Republicans, Republicans blaming Speaker Mike Johnson, all while Donald Trump and Elon Musk push Congress toward a government shutdown, ordering Republicans yesterday not to support the bipartisan spending deal. Good morning. Welcome to Morning Joe. It is Thursday, December 10th. I'm Willie Geist. Joe and Mika have the morning off. With us, the host of Way Too Early for One More Day, Jonathan Lemire, also MSNBC contributor Mike Barnicle, the host of MSNBC's Inside with Jen Psaki, and former Treasury official and Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Rattner. We're going to get to Capitol Hill in just a moment, but let's set up what happened yesterday. A bipartisan plan to fund the government and avoid a shutdown fell apart yesterday after President-elect Trump and Elon Musk voiced their opposition to the bill. Despite having the stamp of approval from congressional leadership, Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance put out a joint statement condemning the bill, also demanding the legislation include a debt ceiling increase, writing in part, increasing the debt ceiling is not great, but we'd rather do it on Biden's watch, and we should pass a streamlined spending bill that doesn't give Chuck Schumer and the Democrats everything they want. That came after Musk spent hours criticizing the sprawling bill on social media, posting about it more than 100 times throughout the day. The president-elect also threatened to support a primary opponent to any Republican who went against his wishes. With that bipartisan legislation dead, Vance went to the Hill in an attempt to iron out a new deal ahead of tomorrow evening's deadline. Let's bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Sirkin. Julie, good morning. Great to see you. Gosh, so much to talk about here, including the future of Speaker Mike Johnson. But let's start with what exactly happened yesterday. This appeared to be going toward passage. It's a bipartisan deal. Everybody's going to get out of town for the holidays. And now, as of midnight tomorrow, the government could be shut down.
Welcome to the next 4 years, Willie. I think this is something that those of us who have covered the first Trump administration, Capitol Hill, during Trump's first term are keenly aware of, and so are the lawmakers who were in the building during those 4 years. Certainly the way yesterday was going, you played that bite from Andy Harris, the House Freedom Caucus chairman. I asked him that question about whether he would still support Speaker Johnson because he and a group of conservatives in the House and Senate spent about 35 minutes going one by one, talking through their plans for next year, which include that border package, that ambitious tax cuts deal. And then an hour later, this must-pass government funding package that they had all but buttoned up got fully crushed and killed by the president-elect and his team of allies, including Elon Musk. So, look, it's not good news for the House Speaker. He was in the Capitol, as you mentioned, Willie, until very late last night, huddling with the vice president-elect, huddling with Steve Scalise, his leadership team, trying to count the votes and see how they can get to yes on even a clean government funding bill with a debt ceiling lift now, something that House Republican leadership have not even been talking or thinking about. Certainly, Trump has been sounding the alarm bells on that for some time now. These kinds of negotiations take weeks, if not months, to hammer out, and they have about a day to figure this out until the government lights are out. And certainly, this is not something they want to be doing right ahead of Christmas vacation. But boy, do they have a lot of work cut out for them. I assume it's going to be a very long day, but today really is the last day the House can get going on this process to get the government funded in time.
Yeah, Julie, as you say, this bill is more than 1,500 pages. That takes a long time, and there's a lot in there. They thought they had the deal. So my question to you is, was Speaker Johnson blindsided by these tweets that started yesterday from Elon Musk, by this threat from Donald Trump? Now he's going to order primaries for anyone who crosses him on this. And as you say, preview of coming attractions, by the way, if this is how the government's going to run, you do anything he doesn't like, he threatens a primary, 6 Elon Musk on you. Did Republicans see this coming yesterday?
I mean, Republicans spent pretty much the whole day. We heard from senators, from House members talking about how bloated this bill was. Let's be clear, this wasn't a clean government funding bill. This had a lot of extra provisions on it, including, of course, the disaster relief, the farm bill, which is a must-pass item, but additional assistance for farmers, too. And don't forget that pay raise for members of Congress that hasn't happened in more than a decade. So certainly all of those things go against the grain of what we've been hearing from this incoming administration, from this incoming incoming Republican trifecta, cutting spending, slashing government waste. That kind of goes against the theme that we've been hearing. And so I'm not sure that it should have been a surprise to Johnson, who spent the entire day pretty much holed up in his office. We were outside waiting for him to go open the floor in the middle of the day, thinking perhaps they could have even rushed this bill, made the House vote on it, and get out of town before this could really sit out there and linger and get the kind of reception that we saw later in the day. So Johnson sitting in his office was pretty telling, I think. We kept hearing consternation around the Hill. Again, when Trump put the final nail in the coffin, though, I don't think anyone expected him to speak out. And when he did, it was definitely game over. I got a text immediately from a senior Senate leadership aide telling me the CR is dead and that Johnson really effed up.
So, Jen, we saw this in some ways. I'm thinking back to earlier this year with the bipartisan immigration package that was worked on with James Lankford, other Republicans. They got to a place where Republicans were happy, and Donald Trump decided he didn't want them to do it because he wanted it as a campaign issue. And he just made a phone call to Mike Johnson and others and got rid of the thing. So this does appear, as Julie says, to be the way it's going to go. You've got Donald Trump, who will be the president of the United States again, and Elon Musk, whatever his title is, clearly he has perhaps equal power or just beneath the president of the United States to get these things killed. Buckle up if this is the way we're going to run the government.
That's what I was going to say. Buckle up, everyone, for 2025, because this is what it's going to look like. I mean, to Julie's point, this is, first of all, yesterday, the feeling in Washington was this is done. It was a bipartisan agreement. This is done. Everyone's packing up their offices, making their Christmas travel plans, and all of a sudden it wasn't done. Which happens occasionally in Washington when there's policy making and bills being passed. But this was a bit of a surprise to a lot of people in this town yesterday. It reminds me a lot, Willie, I think we all lived through the first Trump term when the team at the White House would say something and Trump would say something that contradicted it on Twitter or X or whatever you're calling it. Now you have the owner of that platform as an additional person who may be contradicting what the plan is. Maybe it's what the plan is from the White House come a month from now. Maybe it's what the plan is from Congress. And this certainly sets up quite a challenging situation for Mike Johnson, who, as you read the reporting, he was in a position where he was needing to explain to Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy how government funding works. As much as this was a very large bill, and to Julie's point, lots of Republicans didn't like it. People who want to cut spending didn't like it. But he was explaining to them. And I was also struck by what he said, where he was talking about himself almost in the third person, where he was saying, they said I'm not to blame, essentially, and that this was an impossible task. Anytime you're in a position of doing that, you know that it is going to be a challenging path forward. So, yes, to end where we started, buckle up, everyone. This is probably what governing looks like in 2025.
So I'm thinking of a photograph that was taken at the Army-Navy game just this past weekend. We're in the front row in the box where they're sitting. It's Trump, John Thune, the incoming majority leader, and then House Speaker Johnson. There's meant to be this unified front. Republicans in control. We're going to get a lot done. Looming in the background of that picture, though, is Elon Musk. And that's what we have seen now, where all this talk about Republicans this time around, Trump, he's learned how to navigate Washington. He's going to get things done. He's better organized. He's more disciplined. Nope. This is the same chaos that we saw his first time around, and it's imperiling Speaker Johnson's hold on the gavel. It is underscoring Elon Musk's power here. He tweeted over 100 times yesterday, and he and Vivek Ramaswamy both came out against this, then pushed, seemingly, Trump and Vance to do the same. And we should note, Steve, they're doing it for different reasons. I mean, Trump wants to lift the debt ceiling. Musk wants to slash. So there's competing interests there. But if the government shuts down, first talk about that, the economic impact if it does shut tomorrow night, but also just this unpredictability and chaos that's going to roil everything from government to markets next year.
Yeah, look, that is exactly the problem. We are facing a period of chaos, and the markets will be unhappy about it if it doesn't get resolved. Trump wants to extend the debt ceiling because he doesn't want to have it come up on his watch. You've got members of the hard right, his base, in effect, who will never vote for a debt ceiling increase, and he doesn't want to get in the middle of that. So he wants to push that out of the way. But he also does want to get rid of some of the spending, and some of Trump's tweet yesterday was about all these Democratic priorities, and Chuck Schumer shouldn't get what he wants, and so on and so forth. And so here we are. Look, we have played this brinksmanship game many, many times before. We have had some government shutdowns, admittedly very brief or happily very brief, and the markets have accepted all that. But as everybody else has been saying so far, we now add this additional factor of this larger-than-life force, the richest man in the world, weighing in 100 times on X with his points of view. And so it's a big mess. And what's also different this time is the Democrats are saying, we're not going to bail you guys out because we had a deal. Yes, it was a deal, a 1,500 bill loaded with all kinds of stuff that it was a Christmas tree, but we had a deal. And so now you guys are going to twist in the wind. And Mike Johnson's margin is so thin, it's almost hard to imagine how he passes anything without Democratic support, because he's got these hard right members who will never vote for spending, never vote for a debt limit increase. And so you've got a rock and a hard place colliding here.
You know, it also exposes another incredible weakness within the Republican Party in that two people who are not yet part of the official process, the president-elect and Elon Musk, they are not officially members of the party. I mean, they're members of the party, but they're not part of the process. And, Julie, the other aspect of it that is potential bad news for American taxpayers, American citizens, is what is in the bill. You mentioned it briefly earlier. Things like a new football stadium for the Washington Commanders National Football League team. Other things like that, just thrown into the bill at the end of the day, proving on paper that the Congress of the United States, led by a Republican speaker, cannot do its job. These are things that ought to have been passed during the course of ordinary parliamentary process during the last 2 years, and they loaded up on Christmas Eve, and they can't get it done. So what does that pose for, A, the future of Mike Johnson as Speaker with a thin margin, and B, the prospects of the Republican Party just not being able to get anything done legislatively in the House of Representatives?
Boy, what a loaded question, more loaded than that original CR. I mean, look, where do I start? Let's start with Mike Johnson. He has a very precarious road ahead of him. It's interesting because going into the day yesterday, I mean, you heard that interaction with the House Freedom Caucus chairman. They're all standing there complaining about this process, about the bill, but still say that they support the speaker. I think that might look a little bit differently right now. The big question here is, what does Trump do? Johnson has been working for weeks, if not months, to get in Trump's good graces, to get in his good corner. Back then, he was even less a part of this process as somebody who was running for office again, but he still had tremendous influence, and it's why Johnson spent so much time cozying up to him, as did John Thune, by the way, the incoming Senate Majority Leader. So we'll see what happens on January 3rd. He was unofficially elected, of course, already behind closed doors. Some Republicans, as you played, said that he might need Democrats to bail him out. After this, I doubt that's going to happen again. Remember, they did it a couple of months ago. So that settles that, kind of. To your second part of the question, which is, can they get anything done over the next 2 years? We have not seen things happen in regular order in quite some time. I will say during the first 2 years of the Biden administration, they got a lot done. They got a lot of bipartisan legislation done. They also got the Inflation Reduction Act done, so some big items that they tried to pass. Also using reconciliation, cutting that wonky procedural tool that would enable them to bypass that 60-vote threshold. Essentially, only one party is needed to pass what they want. If it has to do with those budget constraints, that's what Trump is looking to do on the border, on tax cuts. And they're going to need all Republicans to stick together to get it done. But my sources told me there is no interest from the incoming administration to work with Democrats to cut any deals on the other side of the aisle, at least during those first 2 years of his presidency.